Hi there. I've mentioned before how, as a schoolboy, I was a big fan of the Shadows, and in particular the bass player Jet Harris, because for some reason I was intrigued by the bass guitar. And Jet Harris, his nickname came from his ability as a schoolboy runner, apparently. And there's a book, a biography of him, which I'd like to review. It's called Jess Harris in Spite of Everything by Dave Nicholson. And it really goes through his life. He started an interest in playing the bass, the upright, uh, and he kind of migrated to Soho and hung around the scene there, learning the ropes, sitting in with a lot of the informal lineups that occurred, particularly around the Two Eyes Coffee Bar. Now, the Two Eyes was really kind of the cavern club of the London scene at the time. Old Compton Street, Soho, very small coffee bar, and lots of the famous rock and roll acts of the '60s were discovered there. So uh, Jet became an early user of the bass guitar rather than the upright bass. And of course, this was a major step forward because the logistics of carrying the big bass around were very difficult. You know, in many cases, you're using public transport, and you'd get a drummer with his drum kit and the bass player, and there wouldn't be any room on a bus for anyone else. So the more compact bass guitar, which also allowed very precise um, playing of notes, um, was level revolution. Also, it stood out more in the mix because of the amplification. And he was on tour with a group at the time called the Kalin Twins, and also on the bill was Cliff and the Drifters. And Cliff asked Jet to join the Drifters to replace Ian Samwell on bass. Ian Samwell, who had written Move It, which we mentioned, which was, in my mind, the first real British rock and roll record. Fantastic record. And Jet saw the writing on the wall for the Kalin Twins and moved over to the Drifters uh, and started backing uh, Cliff. So he was in the lineup with Hank Marvin, Bruce Welch, and Tony Mahan on drums. And eventually they became the Shadows because the Drifters were already an American band, and they were they tried a couple of vocal records on their own, but then Jerry Lawton, who had met on a tour, gave them I listened to a number he'd written, Apache, and in June of 1960 it was released, and it became a number one hit. And he wrote several other follow-ups for them, which were also big hits. Um, Jet married a girl called Carol Costa, very beautiful looking girl, a picture in the book, and unfortunately, she was actually very much attracted to Cliff, and they had an affair, and this caused obviously a lot of tension within the group and a terrible scene. And Jet was already drawn towards alcohol, and this made it even worse. Tony left Tony Mahan, the drummer, left to become an A&R man with Decca, and then eventually Jet's drinking became um, severe. They appeared at the Cavern in Liverpool, and famously Jet fell off the stage drunk, and this was the writing on the wall. So in April of '62, he left the band, and started rehearsing with a lineup of a backing group he called the Jet Blacks. Now, I didn't know about this, and for my birthday in '62, I'd been given a ticket to go and see the Shadows at the Liverpool Empire. And I was really looking forward to this. And there was no social media or anything, and the news didn't travel pretty fast. And when the Shadows came on, I thought Jet doesn't look anything like he does on the TV, and he's been replaced by Brian Liquorice Locking. And there's actually an interview which I just recently found of Jet and Licorice talking, and I'll put a link to it because it's really fantastic. They really reminisce about the old days. So Jet formed the Jet Blacks. He acquired a new guitar, the Fender 6 string bass, and started playing records on that, starting off with Besame Mucho, which was an old standard tune. In fact, the Beatles uh, used to play it in their set list. And followed this up with the Man with the Golden Arm theme. And they were touring, and at one stage they were scheduled to appear at the Cavern. And I trotted along to see them, and lo and behold, Jet didn't turn up. His drinking had got the better of him, and we just had the backing group, the Jet Blacks, with no lead instrument at all. He then got together with Tony Meehan and made some records. First couple were written by Jerry Lorden again. One was Diamonds. It took Jet a while, 2 days of studio work, to put it down because of his drinking, but it became a #1 hit. Um, and thinking about this, I think this was the writing on the wall for the recording industry, because 2 days was considered a terrible long time to record a song. But in the years to come, with the rock and roll bands who would go into the studio for months on end, um, taking every drug known to man and painfully produce a few records, I often wonder if many of those records weren't actually done by session men, uh, the producers tearing the hair out and getting a couple of decent session men to lay down tracks and then convincing the band that they'd done it during one of their drunken reveries. Anyway, so Jet had played on Diamonds, which was a #1, but the two follow-ups, Scarlet O'Hara and the subsequent records, he didn't actually play on it. It was Joe Moretti, who had been in Nero and the Gladiators, a really decent guitar player. So not long after this, they unfortunately, Jet was in a chauffeur-driven limb which hit a bus, and he was very badly injured. This further exacerbated his drinking, and eventually it led to the end of his career. And he went into the doldrums for a long, long time. A variety of jobs, including being a bus conductor and so on. And just to give you an insight, he was interviewed about his drinking, and he used to keep a bottle of vodka by his bed, and he'd drink most of it when he woke up. He'd then get up, make some tea, and then drink the rest of the vodka, and then go to the pub. And that was his routine for decades. And then finally, and he had a succession of girlfriends and wives during this time, very chaotic time. And he eventually did get treatment and become straight, and he gave up drinking and resumed his career, nowhere near the level it had been before, but he started touring again, and became reliable. Made some records, and there's quite a bit of this on YouTube, where he fronted various bands, shadow type bands, and his playing was good. He was always a good bass player. If you ever listen to the Shadows track Nivram, which was a B-side, which he wrote together with Hank, some very nice jazz type bass on that. And he certainly played the guitar and the bass very, very well. Um, when he resumed his career, he was scheduled to appear in Merseyside in Southport, and it was announced on the radio. And I really did think about going, but then I thought, well, twice bitten, and it'd be my luck. I'd go down to Southport, and poor old Jet would have had a relapse or something. So I thought, don't tempt fate. So very interesting book, um, and if you're interested in the life of Jet Harris, then that's the book I'd recommend. Now there is another book called Cliffhangers. This one, and it's written by Mike Cook, and this is what I said about it on my review on Amazon. I have read Cliffhanger now, well, as much of it as I could stand, and it's a terrible book. It's episodic, the story flits between time periods, the writing is bad, the author doesn't know anything about guitars. For example, he asserts that the frame of Starbase was American. He says that Hank still has the original Strat gifted to him by Cliff. He doesn't, Bruce has it. And there is no mention of Jet and the Fender Bass 6, which is like writing a book about Paul McCartney and not mentioning the Hofner violin bass. That's just a start, and uh, I do say other things that really give this a bad review because I don't usually put bad reviews up. I'd rather just not say anything. But the book was so egregious that I couldn't really contain myself. So I don't recommend it. Jet died a few years ago, and he had a tremendous impact on a particular part of the music scene. Um, his story is tragic. It's a story of addiction, which is common to many, many people in the music business and other walks of life. It's always sad. Happily, he did come out of it and did find quite a bit of happiness towards the end of his life. And he is a character that will be missed.